In the lands where the wind howls like a beast untamed, you forge your path. They say the gales here shape not just the land, but the very spirit of those who walk it. You are one of those souls, a wanderer amidst the churning skies and the earth that bites with frost. Here, the memory of spring is as elusive as the morning mist. The ceaseless howl of the wind is the eternal song of the land. Generations have come and gone under the dominion of frost, never knowing the warmth of a summer sun. The people of this land have adapted to its relentless embrace, their lives and legends entwined with the wind's capricious whims. The origin of this unyielding tempest is shrouded in mystery, a riddle lost in the icy whispers of the wind. Its people, hardened by the relentless chill, live in the shadow of this enigma, their stories interwoven with the frost-bitten wilderness that both challenges and defines them. Your journey is one of survival, of seeking shelter amidst the relentless storms, of battles not just with the beasts that lurk in the shadows, but with the very elements themselves.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Ithaqua's Bane bringing you gaming goodness, and in this video, itchy nose, we're going to be looking at another game by Cezarcapacle, our very prolific designer from Brazil, and we're looking at Against the Wind. Now, you may recall this game being featured in another video a little while back, relating to the actual physical copy that I got. It was a long wait, but trust me, it was well worth it. This was a game that I got from itch.io, and as I mentioned in the previous video, when you download from the itch.io site, you get the PDF, you get a whole bunch of stuff, including vouchers to get the physical books at cost from Lulu. And yes, it was a long wait, but they came through and we have the books and they're lovely jubbly. And yes, in this video, we're going to be having a look through that book, through the tables book. We're going to have a quick overview of what the game is and why I think it is something that, again, I keep saying this, but something that I really think you guys should add to your collections. For this video, we'll be using the PDF. I'll scroll through and show you all the different sections in the book. We'll go through the basic rules, the mechanics, the procedures that are used to enjoy and to actually construct and run this game. It is designed to be solo or co-op in nature, so it's designed to not need a referee or games master, but it would be very easy for somebody to adopt that role. In terms of rolling on the tables, in terms of making decisions, in terms of describing things that occur. So I think it's meant for solo and co-op, but you can definitely play with the GM. As I've mentioned with a bunch of other games recently on the channel, it's good that we're now getting these games that can fulfill sort of all three types of gaming in RPGs: solo, co-op, and with a GM. But when I actually go through the game itself, and there will be other videos, this is going to be a short series. This is the overview. I'll be having a video on creating the region or creating the map. This is a sandbox game, but you create the sort of framework for the map. There's some very interesting rules in terms of how to actually create a map in the book. There'll be another video as I create my character, and I'll go through all the different parts of character creation. Now, the thing is, character creation in this game is extremely simple because the characters themselves don't have a lot of elements to them. So I wasn't exactly sure whether I could actually do a video on just character creation or whether it needed to be combined with something else. But in character creation in this game, even though the number of elements of the character, things like abilities, skills, proficiencies, are not really there, there's a lot of depth that you can create in terms of narrative. So yes, there will be a video on character creation, and then we will have some gameplay. For the upcoming videos, map creation, character creation, and gameplay, I will actually be using the physical books. But for the overview, we're going to use the PDF because it's easier to see the pages rather than trying to open one of these softback books. I don't want to ruin the spine of these just yet. Anyway, let us get started. So what we have here is the PDF for the main book. Now there is a printer-friendly version, an ink-friendly version that you get with the pack when you purchase the game on itch. This is the sexy version. This has got all the color, the artwork, and this is actually the reason why I got the physical copy of this game, because I don't think my home printer would be able to produce the artwork good enough. You know, because a lot of my games, I get the PDF, I print myself, I then take to the local bookshop to bind it up. And I thought, you know, when I saw the PDF for this game, I really thought that it deserved, you know, a physical copy. But yes, let me just quickly amend. Fit to width. There you go. So yes, Against the Wind by Cezarcapacle. Now, the intro that we had just now with the graphics, the sort of keywords, I think you guys got a bit of an idea in terms of what I wouldn't say the setting, but in terms of what the game is. I mean, you could use setting. The thing is that this game doesn't have a specific setting for you to play in. Every time that you play, you will be creating your own world, your own politics, your own conflicts, your own natural elements in terms of how the world is. It's very focused on the winds and the winter nature. And again, every time you play the game, you can have a completely different viewpoint of the locals in terms of the winter and the winds, the origin of the winds, in terms of how they live with. Again, I'll explain this when we do the world creation in the next video. But what I'm saying is that this is designed around a winter setting where you have these very strong winds that nobody really knows where they come from, but they definitely have an impact on the world that you're going to be playing in. But there is no one setting. Yeah, like I said just now, you are creating a new setting every time you play. Or you can keep the same one, it's up to you. But there is no specific one setting for this game. It is narrative in nature. It is another game where you are going to have to exercise and use creativity, innovation, your imagination a lot in order to generate locations, the people that you meet. There are a lot of tables. Again, I think I mentioned this in that other video. There are 195 tables in the book. But I mean, all the tables are also in the rule book, but the book of tables makes it very easy for you to find them as you're playing. There is a lot of resources in terms of the tables and in terms of the main rules engine. They call it the games machine. I think it's called the game machine. Yeah, the game machine. Don't know if you can see that there, but yeah, the game machine is like an expanded oracle that you can use to help you make decisions or to do things the referee would normally do. But this is a very narrative game, very well suited for journaling. Now, the game is inspired by a number of other games. Iron Sworn. I've got to admit, I haven't played Iron Sworn yet. It's a bit too expensive. I do have the PDF, but I really don't like playing using PDFs. I prefer to play with physical books in hand. And I at the moment, I can't afford Iron Sworn or the what was the space one? Is it Starforged or something? Maze Rats, I have actually just purchased. I'll be printing that out and having a look. Mouse Ritter looks interesting. Altaris, I have. There is an English version available now, but I was kind of hoping that Tiago would release some more sort of adventures or expansions in English before I kind of featured that on the channel. But Altaris is a very interesting system. Again, you know, Brazil. 2D6 Dungeon, of course, one of my favorite games by Toby. I did a big series on this back in the last year, I think. Was it last year? Yeah. Mythic Bastion Land, I'm not familiar with that yet. Fate Core, I haven't looked at yet because I'm hearing mixed signals from YouTube creators. I'm seeing a lot of mixed signals, so I haven't actually looked at Fate Core yet. Worlds Without Number, again, I have the PDFs, but I haven't actually played it. But Cezar is saying that he draws inspiration from all these games. So, like I say, most of them I've heard of. I'm not familiar with Mythic Bastion Land. That's the only one I'm not really that familiar with. Right now, the contents, let me just quickly switch to page view. Right now, the contents, the book or the PDF will have just over 100 pages, and that includes a number of indexes at the back, table indexes, the character sheets. But yeah, it's set out very nicely. You'll be able to see that as we go through the book. The actual formatting of the book is done very well. It's very easy to read, very easy to follow. There we go. Again, you can see the artwork. Yes, here. In the lands where the wind howls like a beast untamed, you forge your path. Yeah, that's how we started the video. But yeah, it's a fantasy adventure sandbox game in a land ravaged by fierce winds and biting cold, all infused with a subtle pinch of fairy tale ambiance. Now, a game like this, if you read that, it may turn some people away, especially with a lot of people kind of focusing on grimdark these days. But even for those kind of players, you know, sometimes it's nice to have a change. Sometimes it's nice to not be so grimdark for a while. You know. Now, the core principles: fantasy adventure, sandbox, GM-less, but you can play with a GM. Anti-canon, yeah, what I mentioned just now. There's no established setting, but you can develop one very easily when you create the world. Again, that'll be in the next video. Procedural and abstract. Yeah, there's not a lot of rules in this game. A lot of the game itself revolves around you reacting to prompts, making decisions based on what you roll in terms of the tables, in terms of the game engine, in terms of what questions that you ask and the answers that you receive. So the rules themselves are actually very simple and very few. Okay, abstract in terms of a lot of specific details are not included in this game. So, for example, things like rations, ammo, even in terms of currency, there's no system in this game where you keep track of how much money you have or how many rations that you have. It's abstracted into one sort of value. Yeah, there's like it's not really a stat, it's not really an ability, but there's like a resource of your character that kind of represents all those things in an abstract way. If your normal game revolves around sort of character stats like strength, dex, and constitution, skills and abilities, this may be quite a shock to you in terms of how the game works, in terms of what your character is constructed with. But it doesn't take a lot in order to actually switch over, and it does make a lot of sense. But like I say, it does require the player to kind of contribute a little bit more. Again, we'll see all that as we go through. Themes and tools. Again, you're going to need 2d6 and a d12 optional. I would say that I've played through this a couple of times, and the only times that I really used a d12 was when I was doing things like generating character names, world names. A lot of the other times that I'm rolling dice, I'm just using the 2d6. Because the tables themselves have been designed with the bell curve in mind. So results of 6, 7, and 8 should be more common than results of 2, 3, 4, or 10, 11, 12. But when you're doing things such as naming your character or naming the world, the bell curve is not really that necessary, I don't think. So, like I said, I think I only used the D12. I think I only used it when I was generating names, really. Every other time you're going to be using 2d6. And this is not just in terms of rolling on the tables, but also in terms of rolling your actions, in terms of actually interacting with the game, doing actions, taking tests, doing challenges. It's all 2d6 based. It's not good for me because my luck rolling d6s are not good. So creating the world, physical is 1, 2, 3, and then the elements. So you see here technology, communities, justice, conflicts, religion. These you'll roll up. I mean, I suppose you could select them if you really wanted to, but yeah, I would prefer to roll them randomly. So all these things you can randomly roll up every time you play the game for your new region or your new map. Magic. What kind of magic is there in this world? Is it rare, mythical? Is it occasional? Or is it integral, practical, and widespread? In terms of the monsters, in terms of the wind and the winter, the origins and the legends, it's all here at the start of the book. After that, we come to the character creation. Now, again, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because I will be covering this in, again, I think it's going to be the third video, overview, world, character. But it is a very simple character system. You do not have any abilities, you do not have any skills. It's very, very abstract in nature in terms of how your character is represented and how you use your character in terms of interacting with your tests, your challenges, and your roles. Essentially, your character is going to be made up of two things: resources and traits. Your traits are sort of permanent things about your character, things that you are good at, things where maybe you are exceptional, better than the average person. And these traits can include a lot of different things. They can include, for example, your equipment. Maybe you have a particularly well made sword. Well, that could be one of your traits. You could have a certain skill where you are very adept and you've had a lot of training. Again, that could be represented as one of your traits. It's not meant to be a comprehensive description of your character and everything they can do, but more things that can really be utilized in terms of attempting different actions. The other thing is resources. Now, your resources are going to be consumables. I suppose they are the closest thing to what we normally think of as being attributes. And these are things that you're going to spend in order to achieve certain tasks and to pass certain tests. Now, the resources that you're going to be starting with, there are 6. Okay. Vigor, which is your body and physical prowess. Resolve, which is your mind and willpower. Essence is your connection to the invisible forces. So this is the one you'll be using when you attempt to use things such as magic, in terms of things such as maybe trying to talk or trying to negotiate with other people. Talent represents your abilities and training. Gear represents your ability, so your equipment and devices. And factor is kind of everything else. Every other little thing that would possibly influence you or that can affect what you're trying to do is sort of all bundled up together under factor. It's got here your current circumstance and assets at your disposal. It includes the surrounding environment, your momentum, information you have available, your fortune, scene details, etc., etc. So these are going to be what we call your resources, and you're going to be spending these to kind of try and pass tests. Again, we'll look at that in a second when we come to the rules. Now, on your character sheet, okay, you are provided with a number of different character sheets. You have one here which is, what's the word? PDF writable. You can actually write into the PDF here. You can actually put values. Or you can just have your sort of standard print and write in pencil or pen. And then there are ones which are more printer friendly. But they're a little bit boring. But yes, your character sheet is essentially just this. You'll be indicating your resources in these little diamonds. Let's it's a little bit bigger. So your vigor, it will be here. Now, each of these resources, you're going to be rolling a d6. You can then re-roll any 2, but be careful. It's possible that you roll lower. Yeah? And then that represents your value in those particular resources at the start of the game. Now, you are not limited to what you roll. For example, you could roll a 3 for your vigor. That represents your starting vigor. It doesn't represent the value, the only value of your vigor, your maximum. You can have up to 6 points in each of these resources, and you can get them through rest and recovery, through sleeping, meditating, having a good meal. You can actually try to recuperate or recover your resource points. The maximum is 6. You can have up to 6 points in each of these, but what you're rolling is your starting values. Okay. Now you have a choice. You can either put the die in each of these positions with this value facing up, or you can write a number here, or you can shade in these dots. If you notice, there are 6 dots for each of these resources. If we look at this one here, yeah, and you can. So, for example, you've got a 3 in vigor. I could highlight 3 points here, and then as I use them, as I burn them in action tests or challenges, I can then remove them and then try to recover them later on. But you can have a maximum of 6 in any resource at any time. Again, I'll show you all of this and how it works when we do the character creation. Now, your resources and your traits are used as you're, like I say, as you're rolling dice to do actions, as you're trying to achieve challenges and things like that. Now, your traits can also be used to affect your rolls, to try and improve your rolls, but it's a different mechanism. Okay. They're known as basically burning resources or putting effort into a challenge or into a role. Traits can also be used in the same kind of way, but they provide what's known as leverage. It's a different way of trying to boost your role or trying to improve your role. But essentially, at this point, you need to think that resources are consumables that you can get back. Traits are much more sort of permanent or things that will last longer. Some traits may not be permanent. They may be things that will last you 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, and then they will be used up kind of thing. But these are things that are not immediately lost when you use them. Again, I'll explain in terms of the rules in a second. Let's just go back down. Now, there are 2 other parts to the character sheet here, info and notes. These are purely for you to write down information. I mean, info, normally you can put things like your character name, maybe their age, maybe their gender, things like that. Notes, maybe you want to make notes as you're actually playing the game itself. Now, resources, like I say, you can recover them as you rest. Traits, you can actually lose. Like I say, if a thief steals your prized longsword, you will lose that trait until you can find it again. You can also gain traits. Maybe there's an armorer's that has, again, a very nice battle axe to replace your sword, in which case you may want to put that down as a replacement trait. But this is essentially what makes up your character, resources and traits, and the utilization of those 2 elements in manipulating the dice when you're making rolls. Let's go back to the book. Now, again, I'm not going to go over too much regarding your character creation, because I'm going to have a video as I roll up my character. But essentially, the dice that you're going to be rolling, you're rolling a d6 for each of these. At the end, you can re-roll any 2. And these numbers represent your starting values. Like I say, you can have up to 6 in each one, but your starting values can represent days of travel, things that you've just lost as you've been traveling, maybe information that you've picked up can be represented here as well. But these are like your starting values. Also, those values that you roll are also going to give you information about your character's background. So let's say, for example, I roll a 3 for vigor. I don't re-roll it. So that's my starting vigor resource, 3 points. I can then come down to here where it starts here, starting situation. And what I have as my starting vigor actually gives me my background relating to my vigor. So maybe for a 3, it says here, recovered from the treacherous trek across the Shiver Peak Pass. But this can also be used to, like I say, give some narrative in terms of who your character is, where they come from, what they've done, why are they here. It says here, recovered from the treacherous trek. So maybe your vigor is only 3 because you're wounded, you're injured from this journey so far. You'll then do the same for your resolve, essence, talent, gear, and factor. So it's just a selection of prompts to sort of give you some background in terms of your character. And again, I'll show you how to do this in the upcoming video as I create my character. There's a section here in terms of how to gain resources and spending resources. So I'll explain this more when we come to the rules in a minute. Your traits. Now, your traits is very flexible. There's a lot of tables that you can roll on to represent different traits. Okay, it's a little bit small, but I want to show you how many tables there are. So the first table here is a way to actually randomize your character's name. You don't have to use it. You can go online to the fantasy name generator, whatever, and create your name. But there is a table here, T20, where you can actually randomly create a name for your character. And then you have T21, which is your background. So you're rolling 2d6. Again, most of these tables are designed with that bell curve in nature. So a 7 here represents a farmer because that's a much more likely background for characters in this game. Role. You may have been a farmer, but what are you now? What is your adventuring role? Then you've got, okay, I'm going to go to the double page just to help us. You've got gift, quirk, skill, companion. Yes, you can start with a companion. If you want to add things like animal features, mineral features, plant features, or magical features, they're also here. Eyes, maybe some information about your eyes, your build, your hair, your voice, your attire, trinket, adornment, and weapon. Now, Cezar does recommend rolling on at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So background, role, gift, skill, and weapon, I think was the last one. And again, there's a section here in terms of how to gain traits and how to lose traits. Again, I've explained that just now. Final touches. Yeah, there's not really a lot of other things you need to do except maybe narratively bring it all together, come up with your background story. And that's essentially the character creation. That's all there is to it. You generate your resources. From your resources, you generate some background info. You then have to decide which of the traits you're going to roll for, and then, again, roll and get those traits for your character. And that's it. That is your character. It's very abstract. It's very simple. But let's take a look at the actual game machine and the rules themselves. So let's go back to single page. Now, the game machine, the GM, is actually a evolved oracle. Okay, let's make this a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. There you go. So this is the game machine, and it's essentially an evolved oracle. An oracle is a table that we use, or a system that we use in solo gaming to take the place of a referee or games master when we need a decision to be made. And what Cezar has done here with the game machine is essentially created a multifaceted oracle. Normally, for example, in other games, you may say, okay, can I jump across this gap? 1 to 3 is yes, 4 to 6 is no. It's kind of a way for you to make decisions without a games master. But in the games machine, in this Against the Wind game, the oracle itself is not simply a case of 1 to 3 yes, 4 to 6 no. There's a lot of different elements here. I mean, you've still got the yes and no roll, but this time it's all based on a 2d6 like before. And the middle values have not been included because that's kind of a maybe or yes but or no but. And again, that one needs a little bit of work from the player to actually come up with a result. But it is incorporating a number of other things like hot and cold, shadow and light, weak and strong, decay and growth, chaos and peace. And what you do is, if you know the kind of question that you need an answer for, you can select on this table exactly which one would be more suitable, roll the dice and see what happens. So you could be going into maybe you're going into a small wooded area and you want to know how healthy is the wooded area, how healthy are the trees in terms of the vegetation, so you could roll on decay or growth down here. If you roll a 2 to 5, maybe the wood is very decayed. It's an area of woodland that is dying, maybe it has some kind of disease. If you roll a 9 to 12, it could represent growth. Maybe this area of woodland is very healthy and very thick, as the vegetation really is spreading within this area. And the higher the number, maybe the more growth, or the lower the number, the more decay that you find. If you roll a 6 to 8, that middle value, maybe it's just kind of normal, nothing really that special. Or maybe you can roll something else to kind of give you a little bit more push in terms of whether it's more decay or whether it's more growth, but it's kind of in the middle, so you need to kind of make a decision. But this game machine can be used for a number of different things where you're trying to make decisions or to get answers to questions, but you are going to have to be a little bit specific in terms of what you're asking. Let's go back to this, because the other rule that we need to learn, well, I mean, there's a few rules, but the basic rule is a 2d6 roll. It's what's known as the action roll. So when you're trying to achieve something, when you're trying to do something where the outcome is not guaranteed, you have to make an action roll. And this is a 2d6 roll. On a 10 plus, you succeed. On a 9 or less, you fail. Now, you may be thinking, wow, that's quite hard, to get a 10 on a 2d6. It's got quite low probability. Well, yes, but this is where your resources and your traits come into play, and how your character can interact with themselves and the world around them to overcome this challenge, rather than just the randomness of a 2d6 roll. So what you can do is, once you roll the dice, if you don't get a 10 or higher, what you can do is you can actually spend resources. So you burn points from your resources, and each point that you burn, every resource that you reduce by 1, gives you a +1 to your roll. So for example, if you rolled a 7, you need 3 points to get up to a 10 and succeed at what you're trying. Now, those 3 points can come from any of your resources. They can all come from one resource, or you can reduce 3 resources by 1 point each. But here's the thing. You've got to be able to explain how that resource is affecting that roll. That's the narrative element. I mean, you don't have to. If you really just want to play it as a dice rolling game with very little narrative, very little journaling, very little role playing, there's nothing wrong with not explaining. But I think it really does help the story and help the game if you can justify why you're using your vigor to overcome a test of finding a book. Yeah. So that's what's called as an effort, making an effort, using your resources to boost your rolls, to increase your rolls. And again, you can then later recover resource points to get them back. Another thing that you can do is what's called leverage. And instead of using your resources to gain points for your roll, with leverage, what you're doing is you are assigning one of your traits as something, again, that's going to assist you overcoming the task. So again, you've got to be able to justify it if you want to play the game properly. But if you think you have a trait that is something that can help you with that task, with that challenge, with that test, what you can do is say, right, I'm going to use this trait, then identify one of your resources which is linked, Let's say, for example, that you're being attacked by a beast, and you want to do a combat action. Okay, defend yourself and attack this beast. You could use vigor, yeah, and burn or make an effort to use vigor points to boost your roll if you don't roll a 10 or higher. Or maybe one of your traits is an exquisite weapon, a high quality weapon that you have. Maybe you want to specify that you want to use that weapon. Okay. Using the trait, you then identify one of your resources that you're going to use with it. In this case, gear or vigor could probably be the best ones to assign with that. And then you are going to spend 1 point of your resources, only 1 point on your resource. So you burn 1 point. But what that allows you to do is to use that trait to double one of your dice and get rid of the other dice. So for example, if you rolled, let's say, a 7 for your combat roll, a 4 and a 3, by using a trait to leverage the roll, I could then say, okay, so I'm using a weapon. I'm going to use my gear resource, so I lose -1 gear resource. And I'm going to double the 4 to become an 8, but I'm losing the 3. I don't get the 3 as well. I double one of my dice, but I lose the other dice. So I lose the 3, but I can double the 4. That makes it 8. Now, I can then use effort to spend more resources if I still don't reach the 10 value. I mean, in this case, both ways I'm going to be spending 3 resources. If I just use the effort, I've got to spend 3 resources to boost from 7 to 10. If I use leverage, I'm using 1 resource to use my trait, which is going to double one of my dice. And then I still have to make an effort for 2 resources to bring it up from an 8 to a 10. So maybe that wasn't the best example. But these are the 2 ways that your character is going to interact with the rules mechanics. And it's a very neat system. And it's a very clever way of achieving what the character wants to do. It does the same thing as if you had a D&D character with your strength, intelligence, wisdom, whatever. But it compacts it into a much simpler, smoother system, in my opinion. But again, you've got to be able to justify and say, why does that trait allow me to double one of my dice? Why am I using this resource to overcome this challenge? Now, speaking of challenges, there is the possibility that maybe one test or one roll of the dice is not enough to overcome what you're facing. Combat is one example. You may not be able to overcome a monster with just one attack. If that's the case, or if you're up against a bigger task, we call that a challenge. And this is going to represent a number of tests, a number of dice rolls to try and achieve success. Now, for a challenge, what you're going to be doing is assigning 2 dice to what it is you're trying to overcome. In combat, you'll be assigning these dice to your opponent. If it's a survival test, if you have to make a number of rolls to survive the night, to survive the cold, then the 2 dice you're going to be assigning is going to represent what you're up against, the wind, the wind chill, the cold itself, And these 2 dice are going to represent maneuver and endurance, and they can be between 1 to 6. Now, you can set those values yourself. You can basically set, for example, if you're up against a goblin, you may want to set them fairly low because goblins aren't very strong. If you're up against a titanic creature, a very large, maybe a frost worm or something, maybe you want to assign a 5 and a 5, yeah? The other way of doing it is to actually roll the dice and just assign them as you think they should be. Because maybe this frost worm is big and huge, but maybe he's wounded, or maybe his vision isn't that great, so he's a bit easier to overcome. And these are maneuver and endurance. Endurance is kind of what you need to overcome. It's like their hit points, their endurance, their health. Yeah. Maneuver is the ability for the creature to adjust to the situation, to change, to modify what's happening, because things that you're going to face, nature, the wind, creatures, whatever, it's not necessarily going to be in black and white in terms of what it's going to do every single sort of action or every single turn. Things can adapt, things can adjust, things can change. So the maneuver value actually represents the creature or the challenge's ability to change things as we're dealing with it. What does it say here? Reflects the challenge's ability to alter the playing field, while endurance indicates its resilience, or essentially how many hits it takes to overcome the challenge. Now, hits is the word we use to succeed at an action. So once you've assigned those two values to this challenge, and again, the challenge is going to be a larger test, which is going to occur over a number of different roles. You assign who is going to have the upper hand. Normally, the player has the upper hand unless they're surprised or ambushed or something like that. And the upper hand is it's not exactly initiative, but it does reflect who is in control and who is really kind of acting at the time. And the upper hand will switch from your character to the challenge itself. You then perform your action, so you roll the 2 dice. You use effort to use your resources to boost the roll. You can then use your leverage and your traits to also adapt and modify your roll. If you succeed, what's called a hit, a 10 plus, you deduce. That's wrong. It should be either reduce or deduct 1 endurance from the challenge. So the endurance value is reduced by 1. If you roll double sixes, you deduce. It's not deduce. Reduce or deduct 2 endurance instead. If the endurance runs out, if it goes down to 0, you overcome the challenge. Check the upper hand. If you score a hit without using resources, you get to keep the upper hand. So if you manage to get a 10 plus without having to use your resources or having to use leverage, you keep the upper hand. You can then attack again, or you can make your action test again. Otherwise, you lose the upper hand and you're now rolling for the challenge, for what you're facing, whether it's a monster, whether it's the weather, whether it's a bridge, whatever, yeah? Narrate what's going on. Okay, so the challenge turn, what they're going to do is roll to see what kind of action it's going to be. And then the challenge action is actually fairly simple. You're not rolling the sort of 2d6 and trying to get that 10 plus. It's more in terms of how the challenge adapts in terms of affecting you. The monsters they're not literally going to be causing you any damage, but what they are going to do is they're going to be reducing your resources little bit by little bit. If one of your resources go down to 0, you're still good, you just can't use it anymore. But if all of your resources go down to 0, then yes, you're in big trouble and essentially you're dead. But yes, the challenge reaction or actions are listed here. You're rolling on this table here: tactical, aggressive, or special, and it's a manipulation of their maneuver and endurance values. So a tactical, if it rolls a tactical, so if it rolls a 2 to 5 as its action, what happens is it spends 1 maneuver to gain 1 endurance. So it loses 1 maneuver point, but it gains 1 endurance point. If we roll a 6 to 8, which is an aggressive, is that a spelling mistake? Aggressive action, the character loses 1 resource due to something that happens. So these challenges and these opponents, like I say, they're not physically hurting you, but they are getting rid of all your resources. So aggressive action, you lose 1 resource. Normally you can choose, or you can randomly roll if you want a little bit more of a challenge. If it rolls a 9 to 12, it's a special action. In this case, either the challenge spends 1 maneuver to gain 2 endurance, or a chosen character loses 2 resources. Now, what I would probably do is I would probably randomly select one of these, unless if the challenge only has 1 or 2 endurance left, I would probably automatically just select the one where it uses 1 maneuver to gain endurance. But I think any other time I would probably roll randomly to see what happens. Now, in the book later on, down in the book, also in the tables book itself, there is a section where you can actually roll. Let's make this a bit bigger. You can see. So, for example, it could be a combat action challenge. It could be an interaction challenge. It could be a puzzle or obstacle. But for each one, you've got these tables where you can actually roll and find out exactly what they do in terms of their tactical reaction, aggressive reaction, or special reaction. Yeah, the three options that we have. And every type of challenge, if it's an interaction challenge, they've got their own little tables again to maybe give you a little bit of narrative in terms of what the opponent or the challenge is actually doing in response to what your character is doing. And that's essentially how the rules work. There are some rules for utilizing magic. There are, again, rules on how to recover your resources once you use them. And you will use them because you need to pass, and 10 plus is not automatic. And then the book goes on to these things called procedures. Now, the procedures are the way that you interact with the game in terms of how you progress the story, in terms of how you travel the world, interact with everybody around you. The rules mechanics are how you determine how it goes, but the procedures themselves are how you, for example, you've got, hang on, let me find the thing. There are 7 basic procedures or sort of type of things that you can do. You have exploration, where you can determine where you are, what is the landscape like, what is the weather like, the events that you come across in that specific area. And then it can include things like encounters, it can include people, monsters, features, hazards. There's also a section on delving. If you come across something that you can delve, like a dungeon or a cave system, there are a bunch of rules on this in terms of how to actually generate um, the dungeon or the delve that you want to go onto. You can find some nice stuff inside delves. It's also very dangerous, so be careful. There's a section in terms of the rooms that you encounter. Now, this could also be used in other things. If you come across buildings, whatever, you could also use these to an extent, I suppose. Going down a little bit further, there is another section on settlements. During the game, you may come across places, villages, towns, hamlets, whatever that you want to go in, maybe to recuperate, to rest, to buy rations, to get information. And again, this game does have a system of how to randomly generate a settlement or a village or town. And you'll be randomly generating the roads or the tracks. You'll also be randomly generating what you can find in those areas. And again, there are tables in the book. I'm showing them here: architecture, location, mood, orientations in terms of the road directions, sights and details, activities, smells and sounds, buildings themselves. Once you have found a building of note, you can actually roll and randomly determine what those buildings are, the people that you meet, unique events, discoveries. And again, these are all things mainly focused within the settlements, but there's nothing stopping you from using these outside as well. There's a whole host of useful tables in this book that you can use for any game, not just for Against the Wind, although some of them are very focused on a wintry ice snow setting. Okay, so these are the challenge procedures and the tables I showed you just now in the tables book. You can also do a search procedure. So during exploration, you may want to search for something in particular, or maybe just do a general search to maybe find things like rations. And again, there's rules here in terms of helping you to determine if you find anything or what you do find. Rules for camping, crafting. Now, crafting is a way for you to also recover resources. Crafting can also be used to generate new traits or to recover lost traits. Now, with crafting, again, you're going to be rolling that 2d6 to determine how well you pass or whether you fail, etc., etc. What else is there? Going beyond, yeah. At the back of the book, there is also a section in terms of how to adapt the book into different settings or to different systems. So not just as a game by its own right, but as a accessory and a supplement for other systems themselves. How to bring other characters from other games here. How to incorporate again monsters from other games into this. But yeah, it's a very well designed system, very cleverly abstracted in terms of what the game is and how it works. And it goes to show that you don't need to have a 300, 400, 500 page book or set of books to achieve detail or I wouldn't say realistic, but a workable system to represent things like combat or exploring or encounters, delving, settlements. It incorporates everything here very neatly, very concise. And like I say, there's a lot of resources in this book that can really help any kind of game. But it is really kind of, a lot of them are kind of focused on this wintry or sort of ice setting. Now, we do have, like I mentioned just now, we do have the tables book, which has all the tables inside the book. You've got them all compiled here into an easy reference as you're actually playing. So rather than turning the pages in the book all the time, you can use this. This is also much easier to open flat on the table as you're playing. You will get character sheets as part of the download. You will also get a basic grid to create your maps. Now, there is a system, like I mentioned earlier, there is a system in the book how to create your own world. And again, it's a very simple system, but if you really don't want to do that, if you don't have the time to create your own world or to go through this this sequence or this this method, you can very easily just go and see Perilous Shores to get some randomly generated maps. New region, bonk. Yeah, that's not a very good one, is it? There's not much land in that region, but yeah, Perilous Shores is it's an app that I've used in 5 Leagues from the Borderlands. It's an extremely useful little app for coming up with random maps. If you actually go to the main site, which is Watabao, you've also got city generators, neighborhood generators, cave generators, dungeon generators. There's a whole batch village generators as well as the Perilous Shores. This is a website that I think every dungeon master, every gamer, every player should be familiar with. It's amazing. But yes, the game itself, Against the Wind, does have a system where it shows you how you can actually create your own world. We'll do this in the next video. I'll create my own world in the next video. But yeah, like I say, if you really don't want to do it yourself, go to Perilous Shores, click new region, and it will randomly generate a new region for you. But yeah, Against the Wind is a pleasant game to play. Like I mentioned, it's not grimdark. You can definitely play this, in a pacifist nature where you don't have to fight. You don't need the combat element of a lot of RPGs if you don't want to. It's about exploring. It's about creating your journey as a player. It's about finding out about the world around you, maybe finding out where the winds actually come from, or why they're so strong and magical in nature. But this is yet another game that I will recommend, Against the Wind by Cezarcapacle. But yes, there will be at least 4 videos for this. There will be at least one where I'll be doing some gameplay, so you can see how the game actually works. But don't get me wrong, it's not a big game. It's not a big system. It's very concise, abstract in nature, very simple to use. But it may be I don't know the best way to describe it. Paradigm shift. It may be a shift in your expectancies in terms of how games or how RPGs actually play. And I have featured a number of these kind of games in the past. Infernum was another one. Infernum was a game where it really didn't play like your typical RPG in terms of D&D or RuneQuest or One Ring or Mothership or whatever. It's very, very different to those kind of games. And but I think this is something that a lot of people can enjoy. Right, I will see you in the next video where we construct a world or a region of the world for Against the Wind. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, take care, stay safe. Cheers.